The second principle is salat, or prayer. And I have quite a few slides here which illustrate how the prayer works. It's said 5 times a day. It is discussed in a very famous hadith, a statement about what Muhammad said, did, or agreed to. This hadith is usually called the night journey and the ascent to heaven. In this hadith, Muhammad goes to the 7th heaven. He receives the command regarding prayer. In the 5th heaven, Moses tells him that the command is too strict. God had told him to pray 50 times a day. Moses tells him it's too much, go back and ask to do fewer times a day. And they go back and forth until 5 times a day comes out as the result. The term salat is the same term as was used by Aramaic-speaking Jews and Christians, salota or salata, as a term for organized prayer. The first part of the prayer is the takbir or takbirat, and Muslims put their hands around their ears as shown, and they say God is the greatest. Al-Qayyam, the recitation of a call to prayer, God, glorified, praiseworthy, blessed is thy name, exalted is their name, and so on. And you have the entire text in front of you, if you like, there. Now I should note that this Al-Qayyam comes after the call to prayer. And I didn't copy the call to prayer in this slideshow. The call to prayer is said usually about 5 to 10 minutes before the formal prayer begins. In many mosques, Muslims will come in and they will do 2 rakas, 2 of these things that are going to be the set of statements and motions that are described in these slides before the formal prayer service where everybody will do it all together. In any case, after one stands and recites what we saw in the first 2 slides, Muslims will then proceed to recite the opening surah, the opening Quran, Al-Fatiha. And after Al-Fatiha, we have another surah or set of verses. This one is very common. It's from the chapter 112, Surah Al-Ikhlas. Then there are a number of postures. This one is called ruku. I will translate this as bending, and a recitation goes with it. Standing up straight, also with recitations. Then down on the feet and the knees, and with the nose, forehead, fingers, and toes and knees on the ground. And reciting Subhana Rabbil A'la, glory to my God Most High. At the end of these activities, Muslims will sit up. They will have this posture. Sometimes they will extend the single finger to indicate that they are making a statement of testimony that there is only one God. And recite this. They will then bow down again to the ground, as we see over here, sajda, and sit up again with a recitation. Here you can see a recitation which includes a statement about Muhammad and about Ibrahim. Posture 9 on my slideshow. The Muslims will turn to the left and to the right and say, Salamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakat. Please, peace be upon you and God's blessings. And prayers are said morning, noon, late afternoon, evening, and night. The morning prayer typically is said between the very first light and sunrise, often closer to first light than to sunrise. The noon prayer is said just after the middle of the day, just after high noon. Late afternoon typically is said about halfway between noon and sundown. If noon is at 12 and sundown is at 6, it would be said a little bit after 3 o'clock. Maghrib is said just after the sun sets, while it's still light, and Isha, the nighttime prayer, from the time when it's dark. This chart says until midnight, although many Muslims would say it could be said until it first begins to get light. Many Shias will combine the two prayers. They'll say them as close as possible together so that they will meet for prayer, as it were, only 3 times a day. Here I have a chart on this screen for January of 2010, just picked arbitrarily one of the times I made this presentation: the dawn prayer, the sunrise, the noon prayer, which had to begin just as soon as possible after 12:13 on this chart, the Asr prayer around 3 o'clock, the Maghrib about 5:20, the Isha was said as soon as practical after 6:51, in other words, around 7 o'clock. Quite a few mosques will meet for prayer 7 o'clock every night because most people can come at that time. The next pillar we're going to discuss is zakat. This too is like a prayer that was well known to Christians and Jews in the Arabian Peninsula. The Hebrew term is zechut, which means merit, and some form of this was used for money that was given in order to build up eternal merit, if you will. Another term that's used in Islam and in Judaism is sadaqah, which means righteousness. In Islam, sadaqah is used for alms beyond the required zakat. And it's interesting to note that zakat can be given to the poor. It does not have to be to Muslim poor, although many Muslims will give the zakat to Muslim institutions which dispense aid and assistance to indigent Muslims, very often in the United States, sending the money back to their... There are a number of zakat calculators on the web. I have included here some details from one of the many. You have to first be prepared to fill out all the fields on this type of a calculator. Jewelry that's worn by women is not subject to zakat unless you never wear the jewelry. There's usually also the restriction of zakat to such that it does not pertain to your primary home. It does not pertain to the value of a small amount of gold that everybody is allowed to have without being taxed. Taken into account, however, are cash on hand, bank accounts, refundable deposits on a rented apartment, loans that you've loaned to others that you have not given up on ever collecting, tax refunds, gold beyond the minimum amount, as I said, shares, stocks and bonds, pension funds, business cash on hand, business inventory, net income you are entitled to as of the due date. In other words, things you have not yet received on the date you make the calculation, maybe salary that's going to be paid at the end of the week or the end of the month. And you should also calculate the liabilities, things you are required to pay. When you do that, the zakat calculator will tell you how much your annual requirement is. The next slides are about Ramadan. Ramadan comes 1 month a year, 29 or 30 days. In many, many Muslim countries, it's absolutely important to make sure that you see the moon in order to do so. I have a reference to one website which talks about how to do this, and I have a reference to the Quran which talks about the requirement to see the moon. The verse says, the month of Ramadan, in which the Quran came down at that time. It was revealed at that time, a guidance for the people, clear proofs of guidance and criterion. The word criterion is in Arabic, is a translation of al-Furqan, a word that actually means salvation in the Aramaic language. Muslims will often try to give it a meaning based on the Arabic word faraq or firaq, which means divisions or putting things into their appropriate classifications. Whoever cites the new moon of the month, let him fast it. And the citation of the moon, the seeing the moon, is the reason why there's often such a clear imperative to base the beginning of the fast on when the new moon is seen. In practice, this means 2, at most 3 days in difference between Muslims throughout the world as to when they begin the fast. The final pillar is Hajj, or pilgrimage. Pilgrimage occurs in the 12th Muslim month. Ramadan is the 9th month. The month of pilgrimage, Dhul Hijjah in Arabic, is the 12th. People making Hajj arrive in a gateway to the holy cities. Often this is Jeddah, a place in Saudi Arabia near the Red Sea, or some other location. Close to Mecca, they change into pilgrim garb. The first thing that's done is circling the Kaaba 7 times, and then running between Safa and Marwa. Then they go to encampment in Mina, and on the 9th day of the month of pilgrimage, they go out to Jabal al-Rahma, the mountain of mercy, or the plain of Arafah, or Arafat. At the mountain of mercy, they say the Talbiyah, Labaika Allahumma Labaika. We only are dependent on you, O God, and so on. On the night after the 9th day, the evening of the 10th day, they run to Muzdalifah, and they encamp there all night. They pick up stones, and on the plain of Mina, on the morning of the 10th day of the month of pilgrimage, they stone the pillars. The formal Hajj is over after stoning the pillars, offering the sacrifice, and for men cutting all of their hair, for women cutting at least 3 strands. After that, there is the circling of the Kaaba, and most Muslims will encamp in Mina for another day or 2 or 3, leaving on the 12th or 13th day of the month of pilgrimage, very often going to Al-Madinah. During this time, they eat the sacrificial animal, and Muslims throughout the world also engage in what's called Eid al-Adha, the festival of sacrifice. Muslims take an animal, face Mecca, say in the name of God, slaughter the animal, and distribute the food mostly to family and friends, or as alms, as well as to their own family members. Here is a picture of the Tawaf and the Sa'i, and notice that you go counterclockwise around the Kaaba, and then run from the Safa to Marwa. Notice that they have in and out at 7 times, and there is today a covered walkway, a causeway, that against between those two. Here is a plan of the Kaaba with a suggestion of what's inside. I don't know how many people go inside the Kaaba. The area called Hatim has the graves, according to tradition, the graves of Ishmael, and his mother Hajar. It is facing northeast. The east-facing corner is the corner of the Black Rock, and the door is facing, I guess, the northeast on this chart. You'll notice that there are rings all around the base of the Kaaba holding the black covering on the Kaaba. That black covering is changed once a year right before the Kaaba, and traditionally it's cut up and distributed to the people. The Hajj is not the only pilgrimage in Islam. Shia Muslims will often take the opportunity of going to the graves of the various imams, including the Imam Hussein in Karbala. Imam Hussein is the grandson of Muhammad. He died in 680 in the fields of war at Karbala. His mosque is visited almost by the same number of people as the pilgrimage every year as part of the Shia pilgrimage, although it's not on one day. It's during a 40-day period from the 10th of Muharram to the 20th of Safar. In addition, many Shias will attempt to make pilgrimage to the various mosques associated with the other descendants of Muhammad and Ali, who are known as imams. Alongside the 5 pillars, traditionally we discuss 6 beliefs in Islam. They are the belief in God, in angels, in prophets, and that each prophet brought messages to his own people. In books, the contents of that message, and particularly the Torah, the Psalms, or Zabur in Arabic, the New Testament called Injil or Evangelon, brought by Jesus, and of course the Quran. Some of the other prophets, such as Abraham, are thought to have brought books to their people. There's also the belief in judgment and the belief in divine power and determination. Many of the practices of Islam are continuous with those that we have seen in Judaism and Christianity. In particular, I'm going to talk about several practices continuous with those of Judaism in this slide. One of the things that is striking is that the pilgrimage has mixed up many of the features of the three pilgrimage festivals of the Jewish tradition. Passover includes, at least it included in ancient times, the sacrifice of the paschal animal and distributing it to members of a family. Shavuot, the Feast of Weeks, in rabbinic times was understood as the time of the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai, and in the Hajj, people go out to Jabal al-Rahmah, the Mountain of Mercy. And the Sukkot, or Tabernacles, has the notion of circumambulating, although circumambulating the altar in the temple or the place where the Torah is read in the synagogue, and not the Kaaba. The Kaaba is circumambulated, as it were, outside, and the temple or the synagogue inside. It also has a notion of temporary dwelling, such as a temporary dwelling outside of town in Mina. Ramadan strikes me in some ways like the Sabbath, in that Ramadan comes every 12 months, never adjusted for the calendar, just like the Sabbath comes every 7 days. Although this may strike us as being normative and so on, most systems of years have some sort of adjustment to keep them in line with the sun. 365 days, but sometimes 366. 12 months, but sometimes you add an extra month for lunar calendar to keep in line with the sun. We are so used to the idea of an inexorable week that we forget that many ancient societies also adjusted the weekdays by adding a few days that were not part of a week every year to keep the weeks in line, for example, so that the same day of the year would always come on the same day of the week. There are also very strong points of contact with prayer, alms, and testimony, in some cases even to the language that's used to describe these things. These basic rituals that we've been discussing inculcate central beliefs. They shape patterns of behaving to confirm those beliefs, and they build a sense of belonging, identity as part of a group committed to those beliefs. There are continuities with Christianity as well, not discussed in a particular slide. One interesting continuity is the important role that angels, Gabriel, Michael, the role that Jesus plays, and a number of other individuals in the way that Islamic sources create the Islamic past. Jesus is not God, not the Son of God. The virgin birth is not a proof of deity, and it's not even clear that Islam believes that Jesus really died. One of the Quran verses would indicate that it was only something that appeared to be so to the people around. Nevertheless, Jesus is one of the major prophets and has an important role in the end times, according to many Muslim traditions. Moreover, some of the terminology does not come from the Aramaic language of Jews and of Christians in the Middle East of late antiquity, but comes from Greek, and is quite clear, at least to me, that this represents a more Christian than Jewish background. The first chapter of the Quran is recited in prayer at all 5 prayer services. For many monotheists who read this chapter, it looks pretty straightforward. God is the Lord of the worlds. I think that this is Pantocrator. This is something like the image of Jesus that at least Greek Orthodox would see if you go into a church and look straight up. All merciful, the master of the day of judgment, only serving God, only praying to God, not to any saints or to any other deities. All this seems very straightforward. The straight path is a Greek term in Arabic. Sirat al-Mustaqim. Sirat probably coming from strata. The path part of it. And the way it's usually understood is very similar to an idea we saw in Zoroastrianism very briefly about a bridge that goes to the next world. Easy for those who have been good, and in the Islamic idea, razor sharp for those who have not had proper belief or actions, and may fall off into the inferno. I should point out that for many Muslims, the path of those whom thou hast graced, but not of those against whom thou art wrathful, or those who are astray, is asking for guidance to be part of the Muslim community and not part of the Jewish or Christian community. You'll find this in some of the Quran commentaries, that even the ones that are very commonly available in mosques.